Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to tackle a premise today that honestly sounds hilariously absurd right out of the gate, but I promise you it holds a massive amount of truth. We're talking about getting some of the most actionable, hard-hitting life advice you will ever receive from, well, people who literally do not exist. We'll be digging into how we can find genuine wisdom, practical boundaries, and true patience from entirely fabricated sources. I am so excited to share this with you because it's a real game changer that completely flips how we think about the mentors in our lives.
All right, let's just dive right into this by asking a slightly uncomfortable question. I want you to think back to your childhood for a second. Did you learn more about heroism from, say, your messy Uncle Jim? You know, the guy who always gets a bit too loud and argues about tax policy at Thanksgiving? Or did you learn it from the pure, undiluted bravery of a made-up mouse who saved a magical kingdom in a storybook? Now look, you probably learned a little from both, but I am willing to bet you remember that fictional version way more clearly.
And that brings us to a really fascinating credibility problem we have when it comes to learning. See, real humans are, quite frankly, just too complex to learn from efficiently. They're messy, they're contradictory, they have bad days, and they're super prone to saying, or, well, actually, it's a bit more nuanced than that. Fictional characters, on the other hand, they are carefully edited down to their absolute purest truth. They don't carry around messy, conflicting traits unless those specific traits actually serve the lesson we're supposed to learn. Because here's the thing, our brains are fundamentally wired to learn best from narratives. And this makes fiction the ultimate bouillon cube of human experience. It's like highly concentrated, totally undiluted truth. Instead of having to personally experience every single danger or navigate every ridiculously complex social situation ourselves, we get to learn from these simplified, beautifully edited stories. Which brings us perfectly to the first case study in this explainer.
Section 1. Saying No Without Lying. Case study number 1, Brenda Kemp.
So who is Brenda? Well, Brenda is a background extra with exactly 2 lines in a totally failed 1994 sitcom pilot called The Desk Set. Somebody actually found this on an unlabeled VHS tape at a yard sale. Now, in this very specific scene, a coworker approaches her while she's just sitting there reading a book and asks if she wants to spend her weekend helping another coworker move. Now, be honest, most of us would totally invent a massive lie here, right? We'd build this whole fictional infrastructure about a sick cousin visiting from Minnesota just to get out of it. But when asked, Brenda simply looks up and delivers 7 magical words across her 2 lines. No, thank you. And when they press her and ask if she's busy, she just repeats, no, thank you.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is applying Brenda's 3 rules to finally free yourself from the tyranny of elaborate justifications and those hostage-like social obligations we all get trapped in. Rule 1, no is a complete sentence, though obviously no thank you is a bit more polite. Second rule, the very moment you offer a reason, you open a negotiation. So don't justify, don't defend, and definitely don't explain. And the third rule, do not apologize for having preferences. You are totally allowed to just want to stay home and read a book. Brenda Kemp doesn't apologize for it, and neither should you.
Moving on to Section 2, the Delegation Paradox. Case Study 2, Lord Malachor the Undying.
Okay, Lord Malachor is the big bad villain from an unpublished fantasy manuscript called the Crimson Throne Trilogy, which was apparently found at an estate sale. He is this immortal dark sorcerer who actually successfully conquered 17 kingdoms, but his empire ultimately crumbles to a group of incredibly mediocre heroes. Why? Well, because Malachor is sitting up in his dark citadel, personally reviewing the monthly grain production reports, literally micromanaging. He didn't lose because the heroes were all that strong. He lost because his perfectionism, which, let's be real, was just a fear of not being absolutely essential, completely paralyzed his own dark army. He built a system where totally competent people were trained to do absolutely nothing without his permission. To avoid Malachor's dark, micromanaging fate in your own life, you've got to run through these 3 steps before taking on any task. We call it the Malachor test. First, ask yourself, am I genuinely the only person who can do this? Second, am I doing this because it's actually important or just out of a fear of losing control? And finally, if I delegate this and someone does it slightly differently, will it actually matter in the grand scheme of things? Answering these honestly is going to help you figure out if you're just hoarding responsibility or if you're actually leading your team.
Next up, Section 3, Waiting Without Resentment. Case Study 3, Captain Roland Vance.
Let's take a look at how a Victorian merchant captain from a completely fabricated 1870s serial novel called The Sandbar Diaries essentially solves our modern-day fury over delayed flights.
So, the captain's ship, wonderfully named the HMS Persistently Adequate, hits a sandbar just 300 yards off the coast of Devon. The weather is perfectly mild, their supplies are totally fine, and rescue is an absolute certainty, but it's being held up by incredible bureaucratic delays. Now, while most of us mentally spiral into a pit of existential rage after, a 10-minute wait for a delayed flight, Captain Vance spent 14 entire months stuck on a sandbar doing absolutely nothing. And in doing so, he kind of achieved true enlightenment. As Vance writes in chapter 27 of this entirely made-up book, bitterness is a tide that raises no ships. Wow. He actively chose to control his daily routines and without any resentment. He set up a strict schedule of observations, reading, and journaling. He recognized a hard truth. Our anger does not magically intimidate atmospheric conditions, airlines, or traffic lights into compliance. They simply don't care. Patience isn't about passive resignation. It's the very active decision to not let a delay cost you more emotional energy than it absolutely has to.
All right, Section 4, Excellence in the Dark. Case Study 4, Melissa Chen. Melissa Chen is an actress from this comb-bound garage sale memoir titled Almost Famous, and she spent 12 solid years working as an understudy in regional theater. She learned every single line from major roles like Lady Macbeth and Blanche Dubois. She attended every rehearsal. She put on her costume every single night, and she never once actually went on stage. Not once. But instead of feeling like a total failure or a victim of a wasted career, Melissa realized something incredibly profound. She wrote, "I was not the understudy for the role. I was the understudy for myself." Just think about that. She realized she was actually mastering the incredibly rare and resilient skill of private excellence, learning what she was truly capable of when absolutely no one was watching.
This is what we call the invisible rehearsal. Look, if you only work out so you can post about it on social media, or you only write when you have an audience reading it, you become dangerously dependent on the applause. And if the audience leaves, you quit. But practicing deeply without an audience means your excellence in the dark compounds over time. You start letting the work itself be the reward. And ultimately, that's what prepares you to be genuinely excellent when those lights finally do come on.
Which brings us to Section 5, The Truth in Fiction. Why narrative editing is a feature, not a bug. So why on earth have we spent this entire explainer taking totally earnest life advice from a failed 90s sitcom extra, an immortal Dark Lord, a stuck Victorian captain, and a perpetual theater understudy? How can these lessons be so poignant if these people never even existed? Well, here is the somewhat uncomfortable truth. Every single lesson you've ever learned from a real person, your mother, your grandfather, your absolute favorite high school teacher, was actually learned from your brain's simplified, edited story of them. You don't actually remember their full, contradictory, messy reality. You remember the highlight reel. You essentially turn them into a character so you can extract the lesson. And that actually makes fiction the most honest genre we have, because it actively admits it's a story. The teacher is really just a narrative delivery device. The lessons themselves, boundaries, delegation, patience, and private excellence, those are completely 100% real.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this provocative thought. Stop worrying about whether the teacher actually drew breath. Stop trying to verify if the source material was perfectly historically accurate. Instead, take a look at the stories you consume every single day and start asking yourself, who is your greatest fictional teacher? What is the bouillon cube of wisdom they are offering you right now? Take the lesson and just leave the reality behind.